Well, welcome everyone to the seminar, and be sure to sign the sheet on your table if you're interested in getting credit from CompTIA. We're going to be discussing artificial intelligence and cybersecurity. It's a topic that is sort of in the news a lot now in every conference I go to, but it has a lot of dimensions. Actually, I just came back from Europe, where I was at a conference sponsored by Financial Times in Lausanne, Switzerland. A good place to go by if you want to go to a beautiful place that's totally clean and on a lake and have great food and great wine. But the conversation, everything steered back to artificial intelligence, what it's going to do for cybersecurity. Very much a banking crowd there, and they're looking at the banking financial aspects. And then I came back went to Rome, where I got invited by the U.S. ambassador to the Holy See, and he hosted the Vatican leadership on the same topic, artificial intelligence and cybersecurity. There's a real interest out there in this topic because really it's just starting and no one really knows what to make of it. So hopefully today we'll get more of an understanding of that. My background is that I'm a hybrid from industry and government. I served initially for 10 years for the late Senator Arnold Specter, doing technology and security issues. Then I went to Department of Homeland Security, where I was a plank holder and helped set up the S&T Directorate. And then I worked for a variety of corporations, retired out of General Dynamics Mission Systems, and now I teach at Georgetown University in the Cybersecurity Risk Management program, write for Forbes and about a dozen other publications, do consulting. But it's a real pleasure to be here, especially with this kind of event. I was saying earlier that in my class, I've noticed the change in representation. When I first started teaching at Georgetown 5 years ago, it was about 10% women, and now it's almost up to 45% women, which is really encouraging, showing that there's more interest in this topic. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to the panelists today, and I'll start with Kat.
Sounds great. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Kathryn Wang. I am the Vice President of our public sector at a cybersecurity company called Human Security. So prior to joining Human, I also was at Google for what feels like a lifetime, 16 years. But I'm very honored to be here today, so thank you for having me.
And hi, I'm Tom Miller. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Clearforce. I've spent my whole career in and around data analytics and risk management. Began as a banker for JP Morgan Chase, doing data analytics for the bank. Started an analytic company that was focused on building predictive behavioral algorithms, essentially a machine learning company before we used the name. And now I'm working for a people risk technology business called Clearforce, based here in Tyson's Corner.
Great. Well, let's get right into it. I think we have a slide that encompasses a lot of what we're going to talk about. AI and cybersecurity. So I put this slide together a few weeks ago. I wrote an article in Forbes. It's actually attached to that if you want the slide. The topic is artificial intelligence and cybersecurity. If you go to that in Forbes, you'll see it and you can download it. But you know, AI has a lot of components to it in cybersecurity, and I just highlight some of them. You know, it can obviously provide faster and automated means to detect cyber threats. It can monitor activities in real time and networks by scanning and recognize unauthorized communications. It can help identify false positives, which are a real problem for many analysts. It can be used to strengthen access security controls, and can be used for threat detection, malware identification, endpoint detection, spam filtering and bot identification, password protection and user authentication, autonomous patching, a huge other issue, categorizing attacks and lessening false positives, and adapting to the evolving risks with predictive analytics, and of course incident response. But as we'll get into it later, it also has a negative capacity too, because it can generate malware, as we're finding with ChatGPT, and it could also be used by nation states and criminal enterprises to hide a lot of that malware and actually automate a lot of their phishing attacks. So we're seeing a lot of this happen. So our discussion today is going to really highlight on, you know, what is AI and what impact it will have on artificial intelligence, and maybe how it differs a little bit from machine learning too. So I'm going to start with Kat to give her perspectives on that topic.
Sure. AI is such a loaded word. Who here has been to a conference in the past 6 months? Okay, did you guys all happen to walk through the expo? Yeah, if we played a game of take a shot every time you see AI in marketing collateral, we'd be drunk by the time we got to the end of that aisle, right? And you know what the problem is that, I don't know, 6 months ago it was quantum. 6 months before that, it was zero trust, right? So, right? It's like, let's follow the flavor of the week. So AI is having its moment right now. I would say in general, I fundamentally believe, and as the topic of the session indicates, that AI need not be, it can be a force for good, right? It doesn't need to be a promise of peril. Actually, let's have some fun. Everybody got their phones on them? Yep, okay. Go into your search bar and search AI swimming upriver. AI salmon swimming upriver. And tell me what you see. Okay, there we go. That's always the first reaction. Everybody got it? Yeah. Okay, so what you're gonna see is a salmon fillet from your local Costco. No, I'm just kidding. A salmon fillet swimming upstream. This right here, a picture is worth 1,000 words. This is the reason why I'd say the distinction that Chuck made earlier, the difference between ML, machine learning, and artificial intelligence is so critical is because of this point right here. I do not believe that we are on the precipice of being completely replaced by artificial intelligence, specifically for this reason. It points out good data in means good data out, right? So all of our AI is only as good as the data that we're feeding into it. And this is a really important concept. So, as we talk about AI and its incredible capabilities, I'm not going to wow you with the next, amazing capabilities of AI. It's a generative landscape and the different types of applications for it. You have your LinkedIn feed for that type of information. What I hope that you carry out of the conversation today is the importance of the data that's driving the AI behind it and the importance of utilizing in the way that enhances the human condition.
Tom, I'd like to get your perspectives too and your clients' perspectives too.
Yeah, and I would add to Kat's comments. I think that the first thing I think of is AI is essentially providing this opportunity to move into information-based decisioning, which means you get to move away from individual or judgmental decisions that are being made on a policy level. And I think there's a lot of benefits to that. I think that it's a way to introduce technology to reduce bias or favoritism or discrimination into the policies and procedures of security programs and cyber programs. I mean, it depersonalizes it from that perspective, but it makes it very objective and it makes it very scientific. And I just think that provides a real benefit to a lot of organizational programs. I think the other thing, and you mentioned one of the bullets as being predictive, I think it's important to not completely categorize AI and machine learning in that way, certainly from the cyber perspective, that you have to put a probability of bad on an individual, certainly an individual inside the company. More times than not, what applications of AI enable is the rank ordering of risk inside the organization, because nobody has enough resources to get to everything that needs to be done. And so finding opportunities to be able to properly allocate your resources and to rank order through the use of artificial intelligence, I think is one of the biggest benefits.
So it really helps automate the risk management process that can be very convoluted and difficult for a lot of people, particularly now with DoD, CMMCs coming up and a lot of these things. Hopefully, maybe this could automate some of these activities?
Yeah, I mean, automation is wonderful. We've seen automation do some really incredible things to reduce the load, right, on our operators. So we're talking all day today about the gap and talent shortage, where to tap into that, utilizing AI to automate certain tasks. We had someone from ZeroFox earlier talking about utilizing AI to prioritize alerts to reduce alert fatigue. These are all really great ways of, we spend all this time recruiting talent and putting them in these critical cyber roles. Let's not burn them out. Let's give them tools and technologies to help scale what they do and redirect their strategy, their mental capacity for more strategic operations.
Cool. Yep. Let's see how Gartner looks at these trends. So I'm sure you're all familiar with Gartner. This is some of their predictions on cybersecurity. This year they say that the industry will focus on the human deal, which is the challenge confronting CISOs and evolving beyond technology, cybersecurity, and controls. The people in the loop. By 2025, human failure will be responsible for over half of significant cyber incidents. I think it's pretty close to that now or more, right? Yep. And how can cyber leaders strengthen their programs in the face of these challenges? Design a program that leverages data to improve decision-making, data analytics. Makes sense. Demonstrating how a strong security performance is relevant to success. I think this is neglected by most businesses. They look at cybersecurity as a cost item when it really isn't. It's really a survival and a thrive item for companies nowadays. If they're hit and they're breached, they're not in business, particularly small and medium businesses. Integrating cybersecurity into the overall business with shareable results, that's important because the C-suite needs to be part of the conversation and they don't understand it for the most part yet. That's another challenge. And then investing in both technology and education to establish program consistency. And I think that reverberates everything with Cybersecurity Awareness Month, where we're now, cyber hygiene, all this is really imperative that we really get on the same page and look at the threats out there. So looking against the backdrop of all these predictions, I'd like to get your thoughts on how they, what do you prioritize among them, first of all, and also how do you link artificial intelligence into some of these predictions and challenges?
Yeah, I'm going to jump in. So and I'll start with the 50% plus of these issues dealing with people. So our organization spends a ton of time with customers, both on the federal government side as well as in commercial industry, evaluating behavioral risk of the people inside the organization, not only employees, but independent contractors that may be working as well. And I think in most cases, if you think about how cyber risk materializes with people in the organization, probably the smallest category are individuals that are actually criminals. And sure, like every organization can have criminals inside their business that are trying to steal intellectual property or classified or confidential data. The growing portion of that is going to be individuals that are being targeted by bad actors, nation states outside. And all of us are familiar with the levels of sophistication that are being deployed in these attacks. MGM's a good recent example. So they're using LinkedIn, they're identifying companies, they're identifying job roles, they know levels of access. And then most importantly on the bad actor side is they're finding individuals that have something to hide or are susceptible in some way. Because if they can do that, then they can social engineer and then they've got a better chance of making their way in. So I feel like that's an area where, again, identifying individuals that where an organization, you know less than the bad guy about your employees, right? So how do you get more, and AI is an opportunity to be able to uncover some of those signals or behaviors or events. And then probably the biggest category in the people risk side is distracted employees, right? And these are all of us, like they're good employees that are under a lot of pressure and stress, that are struggling, and because their head's not in the game, they're making mistakes that create all kinds of organizational issue, all kinds of organizational risk. And the problem is, it's difficult for organizations to be able to discover, but again, this is where artificial intelligence can play a positive role. If you can pick up on patterns of events and behaviors that could be indicative that you have an employee that's really struggling, that's a significant way to reduce cyber risk.
Yeah, I think you hit on a really integral part of what cybersecurity needs to look at, and that's behavioral aspects, because often we just sort of program ourselves to what, basically is just a clipboard of checklists, what we need to do. But behavior change, and the adversaries are very sophisticated, and what they may be doing now may be worthless when you're pen testing. They may, it may not cover that. By looking at these behavioral aspects and vulnerabilities, really fills some of that gap. So that's a really important point. Now, Kat, I'd like to get your perspective too.
Behavioral. We've been talking about it in the context of the work environment, but that also extends out into our daily lives, right? So let's have a little bit more fun. Everybody raise your hand for me and keep them raised until I make a statement that does not apply to you. Okay. How many of us manage at least one personal device either for ourselves or another family member? Okay. How about 2, 3, 4? Okay, let the record show that only 3 people in this audience lowers their hand. Anybody over 5? Okay, we still have about 3 people's hands up. All right, well, this is where, how many do you have? Do you know?
So you got it. I'm in the OT cyber business.
Okay.
Your car, that's a device.
That is accurate.
Yes.
That is accurate.
Known facts is that you no longer own your car. You're in agreement with your car manufacturer on software upgrades.
Preach, right there.
So bottom line is that you have a lot of devices you're managing. Anything that's smart in your home, your smart TV,
Yep.
your smart coffee maker, anything that you're around is smart. It's going to be a managed device.
Yeah, so here's where things start to get really scary. Part of what we do is we protect platforms from fraud and abuse. So that basically is a fancy way of saying about 33 million times a second, our technology evaluates a specific interaction, like a login, or music plays, or a page load, or a form fill, right? So there are many different ways that we protect the authenticity of a quote-unquote interaction, but we do it 33 million times a second. From that massive quantity of data, we're able to aggregate 3/4 of the fraud that we're seeing are actually coming from our devices that are infected or compromised, probably with malware or some other thing. So at some point, either somebody got a hold of your Alexa, your Google Home, or your kid downloaded an app, or maybe one of us did, right? You clicked on the link. Your phone is now infected. So to Tom's point, ransomware attacks like what we saw with MGM is very public. So is a DDoS attack for that point. Like, I can attribute a criminal entity or an actor to that event. I can put a face, so to speak, to that. But what worries me or keeps me up at night is all the criminal activity that's happening unbeknownst to us, that's happening on our phones. So we're talking about behavioral, right? So one of the things that we try to look at is the absence of certain types of behavior. So because we have massive quantities of data, we know what a typical user's behavior should look like when they're doing something as benign as browsing the internet. So the antithesis of that, right, is probably not real behavior, maybe a bot impersonating a user, trying to log into a platform to exfiltrate data, to apply for unemployment benefits, who knows? This goes back to the behavioral aspect of it. And to some level, this point of called human failure, we think about zero trust as insider threats. To Tom's point, it's not the majority. The majority of the cases are distracted employees, people who are going about their daily lives and either moving too fast, or in what we're seeing, devices that have been compromised that are doing things in the background unbeknownst to us. So this is where AI becomes really important. Anybody who follows astrophysics, we know dark matter exists because it's the absence of matter, right? We know what uncharacteristic behavior looks like because we know what regular behavior should look like. And if we could apply machine learning, and AI to both of them, then we can start to identify certain changes in adversarial TPPs or certain reuse of malicious code and other things that help us to track adversaries and disrupt the economics of cybercrime.
Great. I think the intelligent bots is a really good example of what we may not know it's out in our networks and systems. I mean, how many of you have had the experience where you're looking at buying something, you do a search on the internet or even talk about it with your spouse or friend, and all of a sudden you get 5 pop-ups on your social media or even get emails. It says something about privacy, but it also says something about the fact that the pervasive nature of these bots in marketing are everywhere. They're consuming us. So think about the other issue of that. What if they were nefarious bots? What if they were programmed to really steal your information, impersonate you, enabled by artificial intelligence? And the implications there are almost catastrophic. So I think we have to look at that as a real threat. And I think that's one of the big areas that as often we just take for granted. And again, that also ties into, and we're sort of covering sort of the negative part here, but deep fakes. You're seeing a lot of that now. Voice impersonation. There was a horrible case where someone did an attack on a mother that impersonated her daughter's voice, saying she'd been kidnapped. Luckily, she called her daughter and she was okay, but it impersonated her voice. So you're really losing. I think Vint Cerf said, who's the chief evangelist for Google, said that there's no such thing as privacy anymore. So this privacy now is really getting warped to the point where it could have some really bad things happen, and the asymmetrical nature of the adversaries taking advantage of it is one of the bad things with artificial intelligence, because they could automate these phishing attacks that they're now sending in maybe 1,000, they're sending 1 million at a time, and it only takes one. And we have to be able to be on the defensive, so you have to balance the good and the bad. So I'd like to get your perspective on how we could sort of balance the playing field, because we're at a disadvantage.
Well, I'll take it from this people perspective. I think that anytime I think all artificial intelligence programs need to have a human component to it. I mean, there needs to be some element of policy, some element of a steering committee, some oversight at an organizational level in order to make sure that how the technology is being applied is actually going to serve its end purpose. And I think part of that could be further engagement or extended engagement into the employee base and the organization itself. Like, you need to create, so leadership or the technology team, the IT group, the data scientists that are building the systems to detect risk, it really needs to be understood throughout the organization, and they need to be transparent with the employees in the organization if in fact this is being used on their devices and their technology, so they understand it. I think the idea of consent is an important one. I think it builds trust inside the organization. But at the end of the day, if you can stay away from anything that's going to portray a black box as your solution to identifying risk, the better off you're going to be. And I think, again, that is inserting the right level of human intervention or people intervention into the way you set up the programs.
Yeah. Of the entities that we protect and the partners that we work with, I feel like the ones that are really killing it, the ones that are winning, are the ones that are investing in technology that incorporates AI. But we don't need to be looking at AI as this, magic wand or this next big innovative things. There are ways to layer AI on top of what we're already doing that makes our tools a force multiplier, right? What if we took every single cyber attack attempt and turned that as an opportunity to attack the adversaries in return, right? Like, what could we collect on the telemetry when they're attacking us to say, oh, interesting, this is where they located, and this is, how many shell corporations are associated with that. They're using derivative code that's known from this malware family, X, Y, and Z. Let's package that up together, throw some, I'm making this sound easy, like it's some kind of a cooking show, but package that with some threat intelligence, and then share that with our friends over at law enforcement to try and do some criminal takedowns. There are plenty of technologies out there that are continuing to push the envelope of innovation. They're layering on AI. We shouldn't be intimidated by trying to find brand new AI technology. Let's enhance what we have right now, and force and multiply the data that we have to work harder.
Makes sense, and I love the idea of threat detection. And I think what the complexity that you mentioned, which is sometimes defeating, can be streamlined through the orchestration of AI. I think the average company has like 35 security tools, and they have the administrators that leave, they just sit on the system, they become vulnerabilities, and maybe AI can be used to detect what you don't need and what you need to be more optimized. So I think there's good applications there too. But I'd love to get your perspectives on what you see is AI a force for good, or is it a force to worry about from a threat perspective? Obviously there's two. Go ahead.
Security awareness training, part of it is trying to make your workforce more cyber savvy, or at least look out for emails that are phishing emails, for example. Pre-AI, you teach your workforce on looking for certain patterns or certain English words that doesn't make sense, grammar mistakes. Obviously, looking at the header mix is the best way to figure out whether it's a phishing email. But teaching them, okay, this is the grammar to look for, these are the things are red flags. You can copy paste that content, like some PD can just put it in the chat GPT, for example, and create a US English style email that is convincing and will have an impact on clicking on the link or downloading the file, for example. And so you see a lot of these emails, sophisticated phishing emails, post AI, like as ChatGPT and other LLMs are getting adopted. So it's becoming much more harder for your workforce to be aware of those kind of things to look out for. So the traditional ways of looking for email phishing emails is no longer valid.
Yeah.
There is a fraud GPT, for example, can create malware that is undetected.
Yes. Yeah.
So post LLMs and AI, how do you look at cyber? At least from cyber hygiene, even in your own home.
Yeah, so and I'll jump in. I make two comments on that. I think that you're right. It just gets ever sophisticated, and you need everybody in the company to be hyper focused and hyper engaged on what they're doing. And so I think AI comes into this in two other ways. One is if you can use it to weed out some of the more mundane work that quite frankly is boring the employee, and have them be able to focus on higher intellect decisions that they're making, they're going to be more engaged and they're going to be more focused and they're less inclined to make mistakes, right? So using AI to clear out noise, which I'm sure some of you are doing today, and being able to focus on really the thinking parts of someone's job is going to get them more focused. And I think the second thing, and I talked about behavioral identification, there's a couple things, like in this audience and where we sit today, certainly using security clearance example is a good one. Substance abuse, financial problems, number one and two reasons why security clearances aren't renewed or not granted in the first place. Financial stress in particular, massive problem. Like every industry, it's not a white collar, blue collar, it's not an income issue. Like people have financial problems all the time. And so and most organizations are not inclined to pick up on some of these behaviors and events and indicators, and they need to be, because these are the things that employees struggle with, and these are good employees that you want to retain, but they're in a bad cycle of life at that point. And so again, I think for organizations to be proactive and to try to pick up on signals that they've got a potentially disengaged employee at some level, and using systems and policies and everything they can to be able to get that person to focus, because those examples you're giving are definitely unfocused individuals that just are making mistakes, but the mistakes have huge ramifications today.
I like the behavioral flag. Do you have other examples that you'd like to portray about leveraging AI in a good way?
So Tom's perspective is definitely focused on the behavioral side inside the company. Our company focuses on outside, right? So the way that we just interact online in our daily lives on our phones. I would say I would like to see. Just think about how difficult it is to train 7 billion people on the cybersecurity basics. It's impossible, right? It's really hard. Trying to explain to my grandma some of the basics of what I do every day is just an exercise in futility. However, I will say it opens up a really important point about we do all share cybersecurity. We started the conversation in the morning. It is everybody's problem. However, there is a responsibility for anybody who owns a platform to shoulder some of that burden on behalf of the users, right? It is not your fault if you have an MGM Grand account, the rewards program, that could all have been breached with the recent ransomware attack. We don't know. It is not your, we can't just stop our operations, or entities can't stop having these types of reward programs or login, because sensitive data sits behind that front door, right? So that's not the solution either. But what we can do, what I want to see more of, is AI being leveraged at multiple stages. So this actually applies inside the employment corporate world too. You are responsible for not clicking on a bad link. But let's say that it happens. There have to be 3 or 4 other checks and balances before that adversary gets to their end goal, where there will be some other filtration in there to pick it up. And then hopefully AI addresses at least one or more of them. And then there is some unification in the background to be able to stitch that whole visibility picture together. So I mean, we do a component of that. We try to be a solution for platforms that shoulder some of that burden, right? So if your devices are infected with malware, the answer is not uninfect your device. It's just going to be there tomorrow, right? The answer is not be the best AI out there. We're in an arms race. We should not be thinking in a linear path to win the AI game. We should be thinking in a way about, if AI or ChatGPT or some other type of weaponized cyber attack is going to be conducted at scale, what tools are they going to use? And could we get really good at identifying the use of those tools and stop that lowest common denominator in the kill chain? Right? So there are tons of ways to address that. We just got to be creative enough to think about it in a non-linear way.
I like your fish. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I appreciate the conversation for sure. So I'm in the compliance world, so the benefit, we can use it to help us find certain trends and ensure that we're doing the right things. I'm just wondering from the risk perspective, being president where you guys are sitting, sometimes I'm just wondering if AI actually presents more risk, because if we don't teach it the right way, it won't pick up the anomaly detection. It will think it's normal behavior, and then we dismiss the flags entirely. So we are trying to use AI in the compliance world, but if we don't teach it the right way, we're actually in a model that is not helpful.
Right.
And so we're trying to figure out how to work through that data issue. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah. That's a good data, bad data issue, which we covered in the last session. Would you both like to elaborate on that?
Yeah, you want to start, or?
First thing I do, we talked about the joke, take a shot every time you see marketing collateral that has AI in it when you walk down an aisle now.
Yeah.
First thing that I do is I ask, tell me how your AI works. Tell me what data it's trained off of. Tell me all X, Y, and Z. I make a point to peel that onion to understand where that data is coming from and the fidelity that it represents. So one thing that we've seen a lot of is, so we will look across the cybersecurity landscape and try to parse out actual human interactions, legitimate behavioral human interactions versus the non-human. The reason why this is important is because almost 60% of the interactions that happen online right now are fake. They're done by bots. These aren't benign crawlers that are indexing for Google. These are bots that have very specific puppet overlords that tell it to do naughty things, right? And what happens is the bots that visit these web pages are creating a bunch of noise. So imagine trying to drink seawater. That's what the bots do to contaminate the water source. They are conducting a bunch of extra interactions to create noise within your data, and people are making critical business decisions based off of bad data. So not just training AI, but it is an existential threat if you are Peloton and you have direct goals trying to drive new user signups for the year, and half of them are fake. We have people coming to us trying to go public with their social media platform, and they want to use this as a platform to validate how many real users that they have before they get their valuation. So there is a need for us to leverage AI, leverage machine learning, leverage technology in general to filter out a lot of the noise so that the data that we're using to make critical business decisions is legit, and whatever data that goes into those AI learning models is trustworthy, is the data that you want to drive the intelligence. So I would say ask where the data is coming from, understand its fidelity, and then make sure on your own side that there's no data contamination.
Sounds like we need standards, right?
Yeah, I mean, and I would just add, I think the opportunity to create an intersection between some of the account level anomalies that you see across the network and some of the individual behaviors and events that occur by the people that own those accounts is a way to put another check against, again, where AI is turning up as potentially risk signals inside the business. Like that becomes a big piece. And then maybe the other comment that I think we're seeing more with our customer base is they're really tying compliance and security together by updating policies where they're communicating behavioral expectation out to the employee base and basically getting them to sign up for it. And then when they're looking at security risk, it's not just a function of how much signal risk is coming and they're trying to evaluate and use AI to determine it, but they've also got this backstop that, hey, I asked you to self-report this and you didn't self-report it. Like now I've got a compliance issue that I'm investigating in conjunction with the security issue.
Makes sense. In the back?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, Chuck, a great question up here. So when you talk about risk, AI poses either reward or risk to either knowledge, my world, actual physical threat. And so, and I'm talking about when a virtual command can have a kinetic effect through a cyber-physical system and create an unsafe condition for humans. So you brought up earlier, the cybersecurity is kind of an add-on. It's kind of an optional discussion how much you invest in that. When do we start talking about safety, public human safety, when we're looking at cyber-physical systems and the impact of AI and ML on that? And how do we get that discussion going? So once it becomes a safety program, it's no longer an optional program. Now you have to invest in protecting the human condition.
Yeah.
So how do we...
You bring up a great point. I mean, safety really is something that everyone can understand, right? Cybersecurity is a nebulous for most people. And whether we're talking about child trafficking, human trafficking, it's a safety issue for people. It's the same with digital. And again, the OT-IT issue too, which is now, the Colonial Pipeline, we didn't know if the OT part was contaminated. Came through the IT, but we had to close down the whole East Coast for energy because of just a perception that it might be. So I think we got to look at it, first of all, integrating physical and cybersecurity. When you're looking at energy, you're dealing with physical threats now. They're attacking with rifles, a lot of these power plants. So you have the EMP issue of a solar flare. All these things have physical things, and then you have the compromise, with devices, with people, whether it be at a casino or somewhere else. So it's really an integration of the physical and cyber part. So I think safety really does need to be at the top of the conversation, and maybe that's a better way for cybersecurity awareness to really be basically offered to the general public, because we've tried a lot over the last few years. I think we're making inroads, but still, like you said, there's very little, from corporations and particularly small, medium businesses. There's almost an indifference or a lack of knowledge, and I think they're just afraid of it. And so I think we have to put this in language that people can understand. But it's a good question.
So one comment that I noticed this year, we started the year off, I believe it was with TechNet in Baltimore, right? So we had our military executives out there saying, AI is great, bring us your stuff. We want all your emerging technologies. We want to engage with you. I mean, borderline, I mean, they were happy, almost borderline. So by June, we're at FCOS. Total change. It is now, what is your AI defense? Bring us your AI defense. We want to know what industry has. So just in that 6-month period, how it went from this is the hottest, sexiest thing we've seen since the Common Access card to, that was a joke, to, oh gosh, what have we released and how do we control it?
Yeah. So I love being that person in these conversations. So apathy. That's what you said early, and it goes back to gentleman in the back. This is point 2 years ago at DEF CON, one of our threat intelligence folks was able to hack a insulin pump because her mom has type 2 diabetes. Want to take a guess how long it took her to hack into it? More or less. More or less. So whenever I come across a small to medium-sized businesses apathetic about that, and I'm like, what keeps me up at night is it doesn't even need to be a nation state, some criminal opportunist that logs or hacks into that platform and takes 100,000 people hostage without ever having to kidnap a single one of them. All of it.
Yeah.
They live inside our bodies, right, in some cases, and they are not protected. Like, absolutely, the conversation should be happening now. It should have been happening when these devices were even made, right? I've stopped caring if I'm that person in the conversation anymore to point out what is it going to take, what lives need to be on the line for you to start caring about this and making it a priority. Now, I mean, we're talking more, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. But I think hopefully everybody leaving the conversation can understand there are absolutely very beneficial AI applications to enhancing the human condition, but we cannot succeed if we turn a blind eye to it. We need to be thinking constantly about innovation and protecting its use for good.
Exactly. Tom, do you want to weigh in? I comment to it.
Yeah, no, I think the topic's a good one of connecting safety and cybersecurity. And I was talking about identifying individuals that are struggling or under pressure and stress because of the cybersecurity risks that they face. These are the same individuals that create workplace violence risk inside the organization. And we hear that a lot. And I feel like it's like an internal executive selling process, right? Like people attach to get resources against something that presents a risk of violence or risk of safety is sometimes a lot easier than getting it against cybersecurity risk. But at the end of the day, it's the same person that's creating the risk inside the organization. So I feel like there's opportunities to connect these dots at a leadership level or steering committee level or organizational level that can be beneficial, broadly.
Now to your specific talk about DoD sort of changing their tune, I think that's really more of a realization that they're behind, or we're all behind some of the geopolitical threats, particularly China, which is spending immense amount of research and money into artificial intelligence and quantum technologies. And I think they came to the realization with the supply chain vulnerabilities that we had to do something different. It used to be that DoD and DARPA, particularly Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, looked 20, 30 years ahead. Now they're looking 2 or 3 years ahead. And a lot of these innovation units now that are also popping up all over government are looking to bring private sector ingenuity to sort of balance the playing field, because we're in a new era where the digital balance is in question. And if you're behind, a country could dominate. And so I think that's really why the focus so much on artificial intelligence in government, and I think it's for good reason. I think we have a couple of minutes left, so I'd like to get to...
I think we're at time.
Are we-
We're taking a look. I think
2 minutes, okay.
okay.
So we get to the final
Yeah.
takeaways. So the key takeaways are good people risk management is always good for cybersecurity management. Identify sources of risk data, people, platform, and how and where to capture it. AL/ML models turn data into smart decisions and automate orchestration. Predictive analytics is the best offense, ounce of prevention, a pound of cure. Aggregated data offers anonymity to protect privacy. Predictive data helps quantify impact of people and platforms who may be compromised. And there's no replacing the human presence in society. And that address the cyber talent gap and educate your organization executives in good cyber hygiene. Leverage AI to protect, operationalize, and evolve the human condition. And then our final recommendations, our next slide, our call to action. Treat the source, not the symptoms. Document, update cyber policies and procedures. Enable orchestration of cyber security with AI. Take proactive steps forward every quarter. Gap analysis example of current state of identity vulnerabilities. Evaluate and test new solutions to learn the state of the market. Invite experts to provide best practices and lessons learned. Partner with cyber and people risk subject matter experts, and attend conferences like this one to discover more about the topics at hand, including artificial intelligence. Thank you everyone for being here, and thank you for participating.